Thank you very much. You asked me to have a master class. I think the problem with any class is that you must always make sure that you're not putting people to sleep. And I hope that we can have more interactive session. As a person involved both with interactions with the government as well as running my own industry, I hope I'll stick to practical points which are less theoretical but are useful and practical to you. So today's topic that I've been given is to focus on this new section 43BH, which is a hot topic for discussion amongst all SMEs, as well as those who are not SMEs but are buying from MSMEs. And within MSMEs, it affects both the MSMEs who are suppliers and those who are buyers. So we must consider all the aspects of that when we look at this particular clause. At the end of this, whatever I have to say, I will be asking you all to vote and give me points to validate whether it is a boon or it is a bane. That's not an answer that I will give. That's an answer you will give to me and to all of us. So please follow all the arguments and the finer points of this as I go along. Let's wait till the outcome before we decide that. Okay. So I'm going to put this in three sections. The first section is to talk about the specific section in the Income Tax Act. Since it refers to the MSMED Act and the section on delayed payments, we better understand that also. Finally, as I mentioned, we'll have a discussion on its pluses and minuses. And there is nothing which is always good. There's nothing which is always bad. There's always a mixed bag. There's a balance this side or that side is what we will discuss and interact on as we go along. First, let's look at the basic thing on section 43BH. Let me begin by asking how many of you actually read the exact wording of this particular amendment to the Income Tax Act? Now, it's interesting because it's like people have come here without a textbook and without having done their homework. But anyway, I was hoping not to have to spoon feed, but I was prepared for that answer. So let's go on to that in greater depth. The second question is, how many of you are MSMEs in here? Good, fair number. How many of you are suppliers as MSMEs to larger units? I suppose most of you. How many of you are buyers from other MSMEs? Right. So you have roles both as suppliers and buyers, and that will color your judgment on both sides. Fair enough. Now, since many of you have not read that particular section, let me begin by saying that what we're talking about is section 43B in brackets H. So H is a subsection of 43B. Now what 43B says in the Income Tax Act is that when your final profitability is being considered, certain incomes are allowed to be deducted as expenses. Sorry, certain items are allowed to be deducted as expenses in computing your income. Not everything is. All right. Now, within that list of what is allowed to be deducted and certain deductions which are disallowed, is this section 43BH. Now, section 43B itself is not a new concept. It already says any sum payable by the assessee by way of a tax or duty to the government, okay, is not allowed as a deduction unless you actually paid it. Okay, so there are certain things which are already disallowed as expenses in computing your income. If you fail to pay ESI, PF, etc., you cannot count it as a deduction from your, as an expense to deduct from your overall profitability. You have to pay tax on it. Now, what has happened is that the Honorable Finance Minister has now added this section 43BH, as I said in brackets, H, which says that any sum payable by the assessee to an MSME beyond the time limit specified in section 15 of the MSMED Act will also be one of those which will be disallowed as an expense in computing your income. All right, so the concept is not new. The concept of disallowing certain expenses has always been there. And the finance minister or the government, in their wisdom, or in the support to MSMEs, depending on how you take it, has said that if there is a delayed payment to MSMEs, we will disallow that also. The intention, of course, is to encourage timely payments, whether it be to the government by way of your ESI, PF, etc., to protect the workers, or it be to the MSMEs to protect the MSMEs. The idea is clearly protection and support to a particular segment and sector. Now, naturally, this brings us to the fact that it refers to your obligations under the MSMED Act. So what is the MSMED Act? The MSMED Act is originally from the year 2006. And we are sitting now a good 20 years, almost 18 years after that. And I'm sure, like I said, 43BH, how many of you read it? There would be, I think, almost nobody who's read the MSMED Act fully. Who has read the MSMED Act? MSMED Act. Wonderful. I have at least one person, two people. Great. So if I'm saying something wrong, at the end, please correct my interpretation of it. If you have a different interpretation, I'd be happy to hear that. The MSMED Act has several portions, but the specific reference in the Income Tax Act is to Section 15, which comes under Chapter 5 of the Act, which talks on delayed payments to micro and small enterprises. Okay. Now, in clause 15, it says there's a liability of the buyer to make payment where any supplier supplies any goods or renders any service to any buyer. The buyer shall make payment thereof on or before the date agreed upon between him and the supplier in writing, please note the word in writing, or where there is no agreement in this behalf before the appointed day. So very key words come up here. One thing is that there may be an agreement between you and the buyer, between the supplier and the buyer, but the MSMED Act says that in no case the period agreed upon between the supplier and the buyer in writing shall exceed 45 days from the day of acceptance or the day of deemed acceptance. Now, you may please pause here. Don't think that if you haven't agreed anything in writing, that's the end of it. In all these legal things, there's always something else which further qualifies that. So, if you have not agreed on anything in writing, then what happens? In this act, unless the context otherwise requires, the day of acceptance of the goods means the day of the actual delivery of goods or the rendering of the service. कहाँ पे जी? वो ठीक है, हो जाता है, उससे कोई इतना फर्क नहीं पड़ता. अगर 10 times होता तो फिर फर्क पड़ जाता. Okay, where any objection is made, sorry, let's go back. Yeah, the day of the actual delivery of goods or the rendering of service, or, there's always an or, where any objection is made in writing by the buyer regarding acceptance of goods or services. So this is kind of an escape clause, you may think, that if there is an objection, first there must be an objection. You can't be silent about it. The second thing is it must be in writing. Okay, within 15 days from the day of delivery of goods or the rendering of services. So again, there is a time limit. You can't sit on it. And after 1 month, 2 months, when the person comes to you for payment, you say, your goods were defective, your service was not up to the mark, I'm not going to pay you. There is a time limit out there, which is 15 days for you to raise such an objection. And in case that objection is raised, the moment you remove that objection, the clock starts ticking again. So from the date when you have removed the objection, which was given to you in writing, so you have proof what was the objection, hopefully you have proof on how you have removed it, then within the next 15 days, the whole cycle starts all over again. Then there is the other thing, the day of deemed acceptance. Now, supposing the person remains silent, there is this concept of a deemed acceptance. Today, those of you who are running industries would know that in many, many cases when you're dealing with the government, they have come up with this concept of deemed acceptance. It's not only in this payment clause, when you apply for any license, when you apply for anything, if you do not hear anything within a defined time frame, you are benefited as deemed acceptance having been given. What you have filed is deemed to have been accepted. So nobody can sit on a file any longer in the government. And this is happening in many, many things. Many of you would have experienced it. And now the same concept. So it's not a concept which is against industry. It's a universal concept and change of thinking which is happening throughout the country. That please don't just push things aside and hope they'll solve themselves. There is a time limit within which you are obliged to act. So when no objection is made in writing by the buyer regarding acceptance of goods or services within 15 days from the day of delivery of goods or the rendering of services, the day of the actual delivery of goods or the rendering of services is the day of deemed acceptance. If I haven't heard from you, the day I delivered it, that's the day from which we start counting. Then once that has happened, that in no case we've said the period agreed between the supplier and the buyer shall exceed 45 days from the day of acceptance or the day of deemed acceptance. So in the maximum case, one can expect that 60 days after you supplied something, you should and would get paid. That's what the law says. Now, clause 15 of the MSME Act also says the buyer shall make payment before the appointed date. Now we come to this question, what is the appointed date? The appointed date, and this is again in the MSME Act, clause 2B, there are definitions. It says appointed day means the day following immediately after the expiry of the period of 15 days from the day of acceptance or the day of deemed acceptance. All right. Remember, clause 15 says, in no case the period agreed upon shall exceed 45 days. That is already there. But appointed day means that there is an appointed day, which is 15 days, or if nothing is agreed in writing, or 45 days in case there is some such agreement to this effect in writing. Next question, is this applicable to all MSMEs? Now, the header of section B says, delayed payments to micro and small industries. Okay, please note that medium enterprises are not covered. So somebody has an Udyam registration, he says, look, I must be paid in 45 days because I'm an MSME. That is not sufficient. He must be either micro or small to take benefit of this. The medium industry people are excluded from this protection. Also, note that says delayed payments to micro and small enterprises. Now comes the question, what is a non-enterprise which may be an MSME? That's also another interesting aspect of this. Enterprise means in clause 2, again under definitions of this 2006 Act, it defines enterprises. Enterprise means an industrial undertaking or a business concern. So it may be manufacturing, it may be any other industrial or even a commercial concern or any other establishment. By whatever name called, engage in the manufacture of product or goods in any manner, or engage in providing or rendering of any service. So goods and services of micro and small enterprises are covered by this MSMED Act and the Section 5, Clause 15 on delayed payments. Now, as I mentioned, Udyam registration is not the only criteria. Medium MSMEs are excluded. Another question, another aspect of this is that it excludes traders from the understanding because of the way the word enterprise has been defined. It excludes traders also by the clarification issued in 2021 by the ministry in a very specific memorandum. The office order of office memorandum number, whatever I've given there, etc., says from the Office of the Development Commissioner, who was the opening speaker this morning, that the benefits to retail and wholesale trade MSMEs, because they are now allowed to be registered under Udyam, Okay, so they do hold an Udyam certificate. But as the decision to allow them enrollment under Udyam was made, that is clarified here, that the benefits to retail and wholesale trade MSMEs are to be restricted to priority sector lending only. So only for purpose of obtaining financing from banks and financial institutions. They are allowed the use of Udyam registration, whatever they borrow, will work towards the target given to the lending institution to meet its obligation to MSMEs. But that's it. It does not allow them entitlement as under the Delayed Payment Act. So very specifically it says any other benefits, including provision of delayed payments. Again, very specifically mentioning delayed payments. As per MSED Act 2006, are excluded. These are specific words of the memorandum issued by the MSME Ministry in 2021. So traders are not covered by this. They are not covered by many other benefits which accrue to MSMEs who are otherwise manufacturing enterprises, whether it's in procurement by the government, ability to match prices, and various other benefits which are there. Traders are facilitators, and certainly they play an important role. I would not say they deny that, but they are treated differently because of the status of being only intermediaries rather than the original people. So that's the crux of, I hope, the basics of the Section 43BH, which I hope all of you are now much more conversant with, are familiar with now, and its linkage to the MSMED Act of 2006, and what are the provisions which are applicable, or the conditions which are applicable. Now, there are benefits, and one of the key questions I'm frequent... Just 1 minute. Give me 1 minute. Give me 1 minute more to finish what I'm saying. Then I'll give you. So, one of the things which is crucially asked many times, and I've not spelled it out in the slides, is that we are asked that I am an MSME buying from another MSME. Is this applicable to me also, or as an MSME I'm not obliged to pay within the 15 days or the 45 days? So let me clarify that there is no exclusion of MSMEs from the applicability of either Section 43BH or from the MSMED Act delayed payment. So you are, as an MSME, obliged also to pay your own suppliers and in turn have the right to be asked to be paid within the terms of this MSMED Act. So with that, sir, please. हाँ जी.
उद्यमता तो क्या उसमें आएंगे वो उसको क्लैरिफाई करना पड़ेगा.
Yeah, see, the question is nowhere in the Act or Section 43B it says that you must have an Udyam certificate, right? But you must be an MSME, a micro or small unit. Now, आप जो बात कर रहे हैं, that is for micro units, and if micro unit has, now there are two things. One is that you can claim I'm a micro unit. The second is you have a document which says you're a micro unit. I think the UAP says that you have a certification from the government, so to speak, that you are a micro unit. I think it should be sufficient. I am not a lawyer. I'm a practitioner of an MSME, so I may be wrong, but this is my interpretation of it.
I want to correct you.
हाँ जी.
जब 2006 में ये एक्ट बना था,
जी हाँ.
उस वक्त डिस्ट्रिक्ट इंडस्ट्री सेंटर के साथ आपको प्रोविजनल रजिस्ट्रेशन और उसके बाद परमानेंट रजिस्ट्रेशन लेना पड़ता था, और वही इसके बेनिफिट के हकदार जो आपके उद्यमता अब आ गया.
देखिए वो जो 2006 में था वो तो चेंज होके the world has changed. This is today's situation. So 2006, what you say was absolutely valid. Today the situation is quite different, and we must accept that times have changed. The situation has changed, the laws have changed. This 43BH तो अभी 1 साल ही हुआ है, 2006 की कहाँ बात करें. तो we must look at what is the current status and the current situation. हाँ जी, please.
You said the traders are excluded.
Right.
The traders are excluded. So
Fair enough. There are facilitators and their channel of supply and all that. Yes, very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So they are not covered.
Correct.
Okay.
So you need not pay them in 45 days, is what you're asking implicitly. Yes.
Okay. Another question is, it's not a question, it's a concern. Like I am an exporter. So in my ecosystem, my buyers are overseas buyers. Okay, so they are not covered, they are not liable to pay me within this period. But my suppliers, many of them are MSME. So I am liable to pay them on time. So it's just a concern.
You see, I think I was not here right from the morning, but I came in at the end of the session just before this, which was on financing. And I think many of the concerns which are being expressed here are due to the credit gap which they were talking about between the credit required by MSMEs and the credit available. My own feeling, because I think if you will allow me to digress from the rigid thing and express a personal opinion, is that a lot of this issue has come up because a particular segment of business in a particular part of the country. So they hit the headlights and everybody is thinking hard about this. My own thought is that if the buyer is credible in terms of his credit rating, and that is likely, let's talk about micro and small, they operate or are well known in the local geographical area. It should be feasible for them to raise credit not from the large public sector banks or the private sector banks, but from the local NBFCs or other informal money lending options, which I think since the announcement in the last budget, people have not adequately explored. Had they done that and done a cost-benefit analysis, they would have said it's better for me to take that finance at a slightly higher rate of interest than to have it added back to my income and pay 20 to 30% income tax on it for 45 days. So even if I buy locally at what I understand the local money lending rate is about 2.5% per month, you're talking about 2.5 to 3% against 20 to 30% if it gets added to your income tax. So as they're talking about risk management, this is something which people should have realized that if I don't do this and take this additional finance at whatever cost, my hit will be 20 to 30%. Now let me weigh what should I do. So this is lack of realization in time that, look, we need to do something. This act has come into play and we must be prepared for it. And as I think as all good citizens, we must say that if there is a law, let's comply with it. Sir.
In any trading hub, say manufacturers are less, but wholesale traders are more. So it means you mean to say that these liabilities and the benefits are going to be applicable for manufacturers only. The large chunk of wholesale traders are not going to be affected by it.
They're not going to be benefited. They will be affected, unfortunately, very adversely, but they will not be benefited from this clause. And I think that is intentionally the intention of the government to increase local value addition, to increase employment and all that for all the good things for which they continue to support MSMEs. And traders, no doubt, by including them under the definition of MSMEs, is recognition of the important role they play as aggregators and facilitators and part of the supply chain. But the intention behind this has been to support, as I defined, the enterprises who are actually producing the goods or services. Now, this is something which, of course, is where things currently stand. That could change. There could be fresh thinking on it. But as it stands today, yes, traders do not benefit from this.
No, decoding of this provision is that means suppose if it is a manufacturer who is supplying on credit basis, means only manufacturer can ask for payments within 45 days. A trader cannot ask for payment in 45 days.
I think let us understand this, and I am a big supporter of the fact that the terms should be decided between the buyer and seller. Now, but here the thing is that for a trader to negotiate with his buyer, he can negotiate payment in advance, he can negotiate on the day of delivery, he can negotiate 15 days, 45 days, 60 days, 90 days. But please remember that as MSME registered under this Act, you cannot accept payment terms more than 45 days or you're in violation of this Act. Let me highlight that according to the information I have, there are some MSMEs and some large corporate houses who agree that the MSME should sign a declaration saying, this to certify that I'm not an MSME. Now, my request to all of you is please don't do that, because what you're doing is you're making the buyer safe. You are making yourself liable for having given a false affidavit. So please don't do that.
सागर साहब, ये जो 1 अप्रैल से इसको लागू होना था,
हाँ जी.
notice has been deferred by 1 year. अप्रैल 2025 से होगा, उसका नोटिफिकेशन आ गया है. अब मेरा सवाल ये है कि ये कॉर्पोरेट के प्रेशर से हुआ है 1 साल आगे डेफर, या क्योंकि उसको नुकसान होने वाला था, या क्यों किस प्रेशर?
मुझे जो आप कह रहे हैं कि 1 साल पर डेफर हो गया है, मेरी नॉलेज में तो नहीं है. I mean, if it has been notified.
I have given you this defer by 1 year.
If somebody else has seen that notification, please do educate me. I am not aware of it.
From the ministry,
हाँ जी. Thank you.
Reports are there.
It says it may be deferred. It says it may be deferred.
News reports are there, but yet notification has not yet come.
Notification नहीं आया.
See, okay. See, again, my good. I don't know which hall you were from. I was from Patel Baji Hall.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, good. They were the well-educated people in IIT Kharagpur, well-behaved.
from MSME.
अरे ठीक है. हाँ, तो ऐसे है. This is my understanding from the recent readings is that the position of the government, and I tend to accept what they say, is that this is an act of parliament. The income tax budget was passed by the parliament. Any amendment would again have to be passed by the parliament. It cannot be a notification alone.
Sir,
हाँ जी.
Say, I have a micro small enterprise. I have supplied to you. You may be a micro, small or medium enterprise or even large enterprise.
Right.
I have supplied the goods and services for worker.
Okay.
So you are liable to pay that to me. Say intentionally or unintentionally, you are not paying that to me. Correct? So you will be penalized by virtue of this income tax. Say 20 lakhs or 30 lakhs. Yes, for the program. Am I clear to this? So you have been penalized by 20 lakhs or 30 lakhs. But what did I do? Is a micro response.
That's a good question. It takes us beyond the scope of the title today.
No, sir,
But let me just let me just point you in the right direction. Homework सबको अपने आप करना पड़ेगा. Read further in the MSMED Act. There is something called the Finance Facilitation Council in every state, which unfortunately has not been very effectively operative. You are able to go there. Again, the MSMED Act says that the Finance Facilitation Council take a decision, if I remember correctly, in 90 days or whatever it is, which it doesn't do. And then, once it gives that, the person against whom the decision has gone, the buyer, is obliged to deposit, again, the number may be wrong, but something like 75% of the amount awarded by the Finance Facilitation Council has to be deposited. And now I'm talking as the CII office bearer in the MSME Council, we are proposing that 75% which is deposited should be given to the MSME against a bank guarantee. So it is safe, but at the same time it improves the liquidity. Unfortunately, the way the Finance Facilitation Council works and the way the legal system works, the person against whom such an award is given immediately goes to court and gets a stay order, and then you're back in the chakkar of the civil courts and so on and so forth. But it is precisely for this reason that the Honorable Finance Minister decided to put some teeth behind this. Okay, so at least now the person says, hey, I'm going to lose 20 to 30%, maybe I better pay up. So she has, in a way, made this effective on a cut-off date. What we are hearing is, why only at the end of the year? Why not throughout the year? Why not every quarter? So there are difficulties in implementing a thing of monitoring and recognizing which do not allow that much. So this is a beginning. I think the end result has to be a mind change that you have an obligation to pay. Please honor that date and commitment of that thing, because again, my personal feeling, the disruption comes from the fact that you have planned on a certain payment coming in, and that plan of yours totally goes for a 6. It affects your business, your further ongoing business. It affects people downstream of you. So that is really the challenge, that let's have integrity and commitment, that once you make a commitment of product, quality, quantity. Please also make a commitment of payment on time. So there's a question. Yes, please. Sorry, excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir, I have a question. Please hold on, sir. I'll come to you. Yes.
नमस्कार सर, आपने काफ़ी सारे सवालों के जवाब दिए, लेकिन जो मैंने ना इसी में एक्ट के तहत पढ़ा है कि हम लोग जैसे जो एक्सपोर्ट कर रहे हैं उन बायर के साथ प्री डिफाइंड एक टर्म्स हैं कि 90 डेज़ भी है, 45 डेज़ भी है. इवन विद इन इंडिया के जो बायर हैं, मैं कल भी एक मेल आई है, उसमें वो 120 दिन का प्रपोजल दे रहे हैं टर्म्स के साथ कि अगर आपको ये पेमेंट टर्म्स एक्सेप्टेड हैं तो तब हम आगे बढ़ें. हम लोग अपने सप्लायर्स को पीओ जब इशू करते हैं, परचेज ऑर्डर इशू करते हैं, उसमें 90 डेज़ की टर्म लिखी हुई है और उस पर उनकी एक्नॉलेजमेंट भी है. तो उस केस में 90 डेज़ फॉलो करे जाएंगे, 45 डेज़ करे जाएंगे, या जितने सप्लायर हैं उनको एक कॉन्ट्रैक्ट के तहत हम भी बांध लें कि अब 90 डेज़ की बात कर लें उनसे.
90 डेज़ की बात नहीं कर सकते, because the law is very clear that in no case can you agree to more than 45 days. So both as the buyer or the supplier, if you agree to more than that, you're in violation of this law. And there is a specific case which one of the very large corporates, which is very conscious about this, asked me many years ago, कि भाई MSME buyer had accepted our order in writing with longer than 45 days payment terms, and now he says, I had told you I'm an MSME, you must pay in 45 days. What is the position on that? So I went into it in depth, and I said, look, he's right. If he has done it, he has done a wrong thing, but your obligation, because he has done a wrong thing, does not go away. So my understanding is that they did take this up in court, and they did find that they did not have a case. And subsequently, what we are seeing today, that person who was head of purchase of a very large and respectable corporation told me there are many instances when we are overlooking MSMEs and going to a higher price supplier because we cannot afford to honor our commitment to pay in 45 days. So this is the Boon or Bane side of it. This is the Boon or Bane side of it. Anji. Sir.
मैं ये कह रहा था कि छोटा सप्लायर होता है,
हाँ जी,
वो अपनी वर्किंग कैपिटल के लिए बैंक से 18% पे लेता है, और वो जो लार्ज जो सप्लायर है वो मजे में 0 इंटरेस्ट पे उसका मजा ले रहा है.
वो तो अपनी फाइनेंसिंग MSME से करवा लेता है ना, वही तो हम रोक रहे हैं. So that is, see, look, doing business on what terms, whether you want to accept those terms or not accept it, is your prerogative as a seller.
सर मेरा एक क्वेश्चन था,
Be added to that 45 days or only direct 45 days what is
No, for 45 days alone, maximum that is allowed. The person must arrange his...
raising time is 15 days.
Yes.
Will that 15 days be added to 45 days?
Yes, it will. Because the date of acceptance is the date 15 days after he's received it, and the period of pointing out any defect in it or shortcoming is allowed to him for 15 days. So he's not said anything. 15th day se you start counting on the 45 days. So net 60 days is what happens. Right. Sure.
सर माय क्वेश्चन वाज, हेलो,
Sorry. हाँ जी, क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम
मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है
हाँ जी,
कि किस प्रकार का रिस्क इन्वॉल्व है यदि सेल्स और परचेजेस बाय मैन्युफैक्चरर्स एंड ट्रेडर्स आर बोथ इन कैश एंड पेमेंट इज मेड ऑन द सेम डेट, बिकॉज इन दैट केस परचेजर एंड सेलर और मैन्युफैक्चरर ऑल आर इलिटरेट्स, मीन्स 2 जमात पास हैं या 4 जमात पास हैं या 10 क्लास पास हैं. ऐसे केसों में किस टाइप का रिस्क जो इन्वॉल्व है?
देखिए, अगर पेमेंट हो जाती है तो बहुत अच्छी बात, नहीं होती तो फिर तो उलझने जो हैं वो बेशुमार हैं.
उलझन कोई नहीं है, पेमेंट सेम डे हो जाती है सर.
नहीं, पेमेंट सेम डे हो जाती है तो उसमें किसी को कोई दिक्कत नहीं है.
इन कैश,
सॉरी, कैश में हो जाती है तो ठीक है. देखिए दैट इज़ वाई द गवर्नमेंट इज़ ट्राइंग टू मेक थिंग्स ईजी कि सब फॉर्मल सेक्टर में आइएगा तो कि पूरा रिकॉर्ड हो आपका कि भाई किस दिन आपने सप्लाई किया। आजकल ई-वे बिल है, उस पर ठप्पा लगाए कि आपने किस दिन सप्लाई किया है। इट इज़ डिफ़िकल्ट फॉर द सप्लायर, फॉर द बायर टू आर्ग्यू कि भाई मुझे मिला नहीं।
नहीं
तो ये चीज़ें फॉर्मल सेक्टर में आने से बहुत फ़ायदे हैं, और जो दिक्कतें थी वो गवर्नमेंट रिमूव करने के लिए कम से कम सुनवाई करने के लिए तो तैयार है। अब वो कब कर सकते हैं वो आगे की बात है, और बाकी हमें सब ये सुझाव तो उनको देने चाहिए कि जी ये चेंज करिए, ये मॉडिफाई करिए तो कि बिज़नेस MSMEs के लिए ईजिली हो सके,
तक ये जो 43BH वगैरह से बच सकें। ओके, थैंक यू सर।
हाँ जी, थैंक यू सो मच।